Hi everyone, and welcome to the 2022 USTA Spring League Virtual Team Captain Meeting. My name is Tracy Debnam. I'm the local league coordinator for the adult leagues here in Raleigh. And I just again want to welcome you and also thank you for serving as captain. We definitely couldn't run the leagues without you, and we really appreciate everything that you do on and off the court to keep your teams at the matches and keep everything running smoothly throughout the season. So today I'm just going to go over some things that will hopefully help you do your job and make things a little bit easier for you. The people that you see listed here are the RTA board and staff. RTA is really lucky to have a great number of volunteers, and we pull from our tennis community for our board and for several of our staff members as well. So if you're interested in getting involved, please contact Julie Dick, who is our executive director, and let her know that you want to be involved in RTA, and I'm sure that she would be more than happy to take your name and get you set up with a committee. So some of you don't know what the RTA really does. And RTA serves as a primary resource for pretty much all things tennis in the greater Raleigh area. The RTA is committed to growing and promoting as well as supporting tennis in the greater Raleigh area. And the RTA aims to connect every player or prospective player with opportunities to participate in tennis. And they do that through the programming, collaboration, funding, diversity and inclusion, community outreach, and advocacy. And every year, the RTA likes to recognize several individuals who are just outstanding in our tennis community. And this year, we are really excited to honor Pamela Hankerson as our best captain of the year, and Rob Simeone as volunteer of the year, Wendy Cialetti as our player of the year, and Lilo Pellegrino from North Hills as our pro of the year. So if you see any of these folks, please congratulate them on their achievements. We're very happy to recognize them, and they do really great things for our tennis community here in Raleigh. If you want to learn a little bit more about each of our award winners, they're on our blog, on our website, and that's raleightennis.com. Another thing that RTA is doing for now the second year is hosting the Cy King Summer Classic Tournament Series. The adults and the mixed will play June 3rd through 5th this year, and then the juniors will follow on the 11th and 12th. Coupled that with a Friday night King of the Court Pro-Am at North Hills Club, which was a lot of fun, and I think everybody who attended enjoyed that. So mark your calendars and get a partner and come out and play the tournament. The tournament proceeds will go to the Cy King Community Tennis Fund, and that provides grants and scholarships for local youth, nonprofit tennis, and NJTL programs targeted for underserved areas of Raleigh. And that's, like I said, the adult and mixed players play in one tournament, and then there's a junior tournament as well that registration will open this spring. You can find more details and updates on, again, raleightennis.com. And also you can contact Julie if you're interested in any kind of corporate sponsorship or making a donation to the fund. So now we're going to start into the USTA Adult League information, what you'll need to know this spring. First of all, once again this year I'm going to have a lot of information up on the Google Drive for the captains. And you'll see pretty much what's on there listed there on that slide. The registration, unfortunately, dealing still with COVID safety guidelines, important dates for leagues, as well as all the dates and locations of the 2022 state and sectional championships. You'll find the rules, local, state, sectional, and national rules on there. Season-ending makeup deadlines, which is super important to get everything finished before local playoffs begin. And speaking of playoffs, the dates and the format and the rules will be on there soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. There's also a chart with the number of matches needed to qualify for local playoffs and states. Pretty much that number is 2 for 18s, 40s, and 55s. One of those can be a default given to your player, and the 65s will need one match to qualify, and that can also be a default given to your player. You'll find the staggered match list, which is something that every one of you need to look at and make sure that you have a list of your staggered matches. Depending on the location and the time that you play, you may be staggered, and there's also a pretty short list of match numbers of matches that are going to be staggered. So please make sure that you check that before the season begins so that your players know when and where to be where they need to be. You'll find a general TennisLink guide as well as another TennisLink guide more specifically for new captains that might help people who have never had to enter scores and so on and so forth. The TennisLink guide will show you how to create an account and log in, how to update your information and find your team homepage. It has information on printing scorecards, match score entry, and finding a match number. And you will need to know how to find that match number in case you need changes to your scorecard after the scores have been entered, because I will need that match number when you send me the request. There's a team management tool as well on TennisLink, and I know a lot of you prefer to use Tennis Point, which is fine. I will ask that you make sure not to rely on any of the information that is in Tennis Point, because I don't know who uploads the information and it could be incorrect. So if you need to know times, locations, dates, any of that, you need to only be looking in TennisLink, not Tennis Point. It'll also tell you how to appeal your rating and how to access captain's contact information. That can be done through your team homepage, and you'll need to know that in case you need to get a hold of the captains that you're playing or email them as you're supposed to be doing before the match. Just some general league housekeeping things that I needed to touch on. If you need to get in touch with me, please email me and don't text. I don't keep up with text very well when there's over 400 of you, and it's much easier for me to have everything in one place in my email so I can refer back to it. Also, if I'm just out with my phone, I probably don't have access to a lot of the information that you need, and by the time I get back to my computer, sometimes it gets lost. So please just email me. I would appreciate that. Also, you need to be checking your rosters at the bottom of your team homepage, making sure that you and your players are registered. If you have someone that you think is on your team, but whose name is not listed at the bottom of that page, they have not registered in TennisLink. And if they play a match without being registered, you will have to default that court. So please double check that. As long as you're not at your 15-player max, you can add players at any time during the season. But keep in mind they must play their minimum number of matches to qualify for states or local playoffs if that's something that applies to your team. Scheduling information, staggered matches. Again, those staggered matches will be on a document in the Google Drive. There are some new facilities this year that are staggering all 9:30 a.m. 5-court matches. So make sure, again, you check this list, especially if you have a 9:30 a weekday morning team. So, as I mentioned earlier, COVID is still out there. Hopefully we will not be dealing with that too much longer, but at this point we do have to make you aware that there are some guidelines and some things that you can do to help yourself stay healthy and stay apart from one another. Just a few suggestions or examples are listed here. The full list of protocols is going to be on the Google Drive, as I mentioned before. And also you need to be mindful that certain facilities may have certain mask requirements or other requirements, and we do expect the players to abide by that if you are guests at a club. A few things that are new this year or a little bit different. The refund requests. The RTA board voted that they would like a form filled out if you are requesting a refund or your player is requesting a refund. Just have them email me directly and I'll get that information to them. Pretty much the refund rule is the same if you are requesting it or if they're requesting it before the team's first match, they can get a refund. If the team has played their first match, then that's the threshold for no more refunds. So if your team's played their first match and someone gets injured and they haven't played a match yet, I can remove them from your roster so you have space if you need it. But they will not get a refund. And if they have played a match, even if they're hurt and out for the rest of the season, I'm not able to remove them since they're already in the TennisLink system. For the few of you that have direct advance teams this year, there are new deadlines, so you'll need to make sure you check the rules for that. It used to be that you had to have your players in 2 weeks before the state championship, and now it's much earlier. So please consult the rules and make sure you're aware of that if that applies to you. And we're adding a new 55 and over tri-level men and women division at the state championships for tri-level this year. So if you are 55 and over and you want to play tri-level, we would love to have you this summer, and you will be eligible now to advance to the state championship. So that's great and exciting for those 55 players. For summer, if you're playing on a 55 mixed team, they used to require only one match to qualify for states. Now they're going to require 2. And again, you can find that chart on the Google Drive if you need to refer back to it later. We will be using a heat rule this year for the summer, and I will explain that in a little bit more detail just a few minutes when we get to that slide, but that is something that's new and provisional for this year. We're going to see how it goes. All right, so our 2022 local rules. As mentioned, the links for the state, sectional, and national rules will be on our Google Drive, but most of what applies to you is going to be in our local rules. So I'm going to go over just a few things that we've gone over in the past but seem to come up again and again every year, and then introduce some of the new rules for this year. All right, so match procedure. Again, you need to be emailing your opponent. If you are the home team, you need to email your visiting opponent prior to the match, and I would like for it to be done the week before the match, sooner rather than later. Now this year, you're going to need to let your opponent know ahead of time if you're playing on multiple surfaces and which lines will play on what surface prior to the lineup exchange. So if you're playing 3 hard and 2 clay or whatever your mix is, you need to let the other captain know so that they can adjust their lineup accordingly if they need to. And that needs to be done before you exchange lineups. Staggered matches, that second set of courts needs to arrive and be ready to play 1.5 hours after the initial match time. And if there are courts available, they can get started, but there's no guarantee, so you may have to wait, but you do need to be ready to go 1.5 hours after the start time of the first courts. Weather issues. Please be proactive and plan ahead if it looks like bad weather, and try to have an alternate plan for the match so that you're not scrambling around at the last minute trying to figure out what you're going to do. Many times it's raining in one part of Raleigh and not in another. So if your opponent has courts available that are playable at the match time, you're not required to go to that court and play. I would highly recommend it just because rescheduling is not the easiest thing to do with everyone's busy lives. So if you can go ahead and get the match played on that day, I would highly recommend doing it, but you are not required to go to the other team's courts. So your warm-up and your lineup exchange. Lineup exchange needs to happen at the posted match time. So I'll use 9:30 a.m. as an example. You should be exchanging lineups with all your players present and ready to go at 9:30. At that point, you send everyone to their courts to warm up with their opponent, and the first ball should be going in play no later than 9:45 or 15 minutes past whatever your posted match time is, which is also the default time, 15 minutes after your posted match time. So you will need to review the default rules in our local rules, and you have the option to exchange the lineup or wait until the player arrives. But in any event, whatever happens after that 15-minute default time is considered a default for your team. Now, if you don't start on any court and someone is injured during warm-up and you have a player there on site ready to play, you can substitute that player in at the affected position only. So if one of your number 2 doubles players gets injured and you have someone there who can play, you can take the injured player out and put the substitute in at that position. What you may not do is move people around or change your lineup in any way other than that one substitution. Once the match starts, even if you haven't started on that other court and it's during warm-up, then that's a default. If you're short players, make sure you're familiar and read the rules about which courts need to be played to have a valid match. Even if the majority of your team is not available, if you have 15 on your roster and it's a 5-court match, you only need 4 people to play. You can play 2 lines of singles and 1 line of doubles with 4 players and still play 3 courts and have a valid match. So just please be smart about where you play so that you don't have a full team default, and put those players in so you can get the majority of courts played if possible. Also, after the match, either you or whoever you've designated as captain needs to make sure that they check the score sheet and compare with the other teams. So everybody has the same score written down and the same players. If you have 2 people of the same first name on your team, please write first and last name so that the other captain, in case they're recording the scores, knows which person that is that played which court, so they don't have to guess. And again, just you don't have to sign it if you don't want to, but just please make sure that you're reviewing it. Also, if you do have a designated captain, if you're not going to be there at the match that night, that would be a great thing to tell the opponent in your pre-match email, so that they're not trying to contact you in case of bad weather. They can contact the person who's actually going to be in charge that night. Okay, posting scores. Southern is really cracking down this year on scores being entered in a timely manner. So because of that, we're going to have to tighten up the rules on getting the scores posted. So all scores must be posted within 48 hours of the match. Both team captains can do it. The winning team captain is responsible for entering, and the opposing captain has to confirm. And you can do that in TennisLink. You'll see how to do that when you pull up the scores. If the winning captain hasn't done it in 48 hours, then the losing captain needs to do it. So the losing captain does need to stay on top of that and make sure that the scores get entered. In the case of a tie, if you're playing 40 and over format with 4 courts and you split 2 and 2, or if if you double default court on a 3-court and you're playing 1 and 1, however it works out, if you can't tell by the end of the match who's going to win, then the home team needs to enter the scores. If it comes to my attention that scores are not timely entered for matches that didn't get rained out, or I'm not aware that they were postponed for another valid reason, I will notify both of the captains regarding the missing scores. From that time, captains will have 4 days or the day before the team's next scheduled match, whichever is earlier, to enter the scores for completed matches. Failure to enter scores following that notification will result in a double default. And this does not give you 6 days to play the match after the posted match date. It just gives you that much time to enter the scores if life happens, or a captain is out of town, or there's a question about the score, or there's some sort of discrepancy. But we do want those scores entered really within 48 hours, unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance where they're not. I think 48 hours is probably plenty of time, even if you're not there and you have an acting captain to get you the scores to enter them. It's just important also because some people look at the lineups from the week before to do their lineups. And also with self-rated players, we want to make sure that that third strike doesn't happen and then they don't go and play another match. So we just need to make sure that you guys are keeping up with that. You're going to have 2 weeks from the time the match scores have been entered to request a correction to the scorecard. And after that, no changes can be made. So make sure, again, that you're reviewing that they had the right, if you have more than one Susan or whatever on your team, that they had the right person, that the scores are correct, that everything's right, certainly within that 2-week window. And that's, again, why we ask you to confirm scores at the end of the match, is to avoid that confusion. So in support of a play opportunity and to avoid full team defaults, both captains can agree in advance to reschedule a match that's in conflict with a holiday or for any other reason, provided the match is complete and the scores are entered in TennisLink on or before the original match date. Captains must only ask for the minimum number of courts to be played early based on how many players can play on the date the match is scheduled on TennisLink. So if you really only are short 2 players, you don't ask for 3 courts to be rescheduled just because maybe the people that you want to play in that match aren't available or for whatever reason. So you can only ask for the minimum amount to be rescheduled. If you have this issue during the first week of the season, then you follow the same procedure as if the match was rained out, that it's played within 2 weeks following the scheduled match date. Otherwise, it needs to be played before the original match date, and those scores need to be in, again, within 48 hours after that. If someone asks you to reschedule, before you just say no, please poll all of your players and make sure they're aware of the conflict to see if they would like to play early versus take a default. And I put the emphasis on please poll all of your players. Again, not just the players that you want to play, but make sure everyone on your team knows and they agree that they don't want to reschedule. And once you've asked and the other captain has said no, please just leave it at that. We've had a lot of cases where it's gotten pretty ugly and name calling and accusations and everything. And there could be a good reason why the other captain doesn't want to reschedule. And, everybody has to have respect for everyone else's schedule and what they have going on outside of tennis. So please just be courteous. And having said that, also, please be flexible if you can. We don't all have the same holidays or breaks or anything. So I don't know. I guess be kind if you can be. Be accommodating. But again, must be played before the original match date. So the only matches that can be rescheduled after the match date are if you get rained out or it's too hot, or you have the conflict with the sectional, state, national championships, which is you have to have the 4 players playing, and that rule in its entirety is in the rules. And if you have that situation, please consult that and make sure that you're in compliance with that rule. The other thing is if you are scheduled for a match with tri-level or mixed or singles, I didn't put that in there, but singles too, on the same day as the Cy King Summer Classic Tournament, June 3rd through 5th, you can treat one of your courts as a rainout, but you do need to play the other 2. And we're just trying to encourage participation in that charity event that's put on by RTA and take a little bit of the burden off the players who have a regularly scheduled match. So by signing up your team, you're making a commitment to play every match. And I understand that defaults will happen and people back out at the last minute, but try not to make it a habit of defaulting courts so that everybody who signed up gets as much play opportunity as possible. If you run into a situation where you are giving a full team default or you're receiving a full team default, please email me and let me know within 24 hours of the posted match. I need to be aware that that happened, and I need to speak to the captain to find out kind of what's going on, because teams are subject to a grievance for 2 full team defaults. And there's a chart again in the rules for the required courts to be played based on the number of players available. You can consult that if you find yourself in this situation. If you do go ahead and play and something happens and you don't end up getting the required number of courts, go ahead and record the courts that did play, because those courts will count for rating purposes and for state championship qualification purposes, but they will get pulled out at the end of the season as far as standings. So it's really doesn't do your team any good to get 6-0 wins on all the courts, because that match isn't going to be able to catapult you into first place. It will get pulled out. So I've had a lot of requests over the years as to why we don't have a heat rule in the summer, and can we please have a heat rule. So this year we're going to adopt a heat rule, provisional for this year. This is our trial year, and we're going to see how it goes. Teams have the option to reschedule if the real field temperature is forecasted to be 100 degrees or more at match start time. So both of you need to check the hourly forecast using the location, the address of your match on AccuWeather.com or the AccuWeather app on your phone. You can't call the match until 1 hour before the match time, and you can't use any other resource to obtain the forecast. So everyone is going to be using AccuWeather so that it's uniform and fair. If you still want to play, then no problem. Go ahead and play. But you both have to agree. When the matches are rescheduled, you have to confirm the new date and time. It's just like a rainout. It has to be played and recorded within 2 weeks, and your makeups have to be arranged within 48 hours. So you can make up your matches as a whole team or by scheduling individual courts at different times. But regardless of however you do it, it has to be made up within 2 weeks of the original match date. And given how hard it is to get courts, you're probably going to end up making up at least some of them separately, just because of the sheer volume of players that we have in Raleigh at the moment. So if you as the captain are handling the organization, then you need to agree, again, on the time and the place, obviously, for the match. And you guys need to agree on what lines are being played at what time so that each captain knows who to send to the match. If individual courts are being played and the captains are just exchanging players' names and contact information, you have to do that within 48 hours of the match being canceled. And it's not more of a responsibility for the home captain or the visiting captain to do that. You guys need to work together, and you're equally responsible for making sure that gets done in 48 hours. And I will not be responsible for managing the process of exchanging the lineups. You guys can do that however you feel best. If you want to simultaneously email them, text them, meet in person and exchange them, however you want to do that, it doesn't make any difference to me. Just however you prefer is fine. You just need to get it done within 48 hours. If you do not have it done, if a captain is not responding to you or you're having issues, 48 hours, you need to let me know. And at that point, I'm going to email both of you and say that you have 24 hours to exchange the contact information to avoid default. The players must contact each other to schedule their individual matches and confirm that date, time, and location. Again, if something happens and then one of those people cannot make it, you can sub in a player that was not on the original scorecard, or it's a default. There is no reschedule of that makeup unless you get rained out at your new date. So again, for rain makeup that didn't start on a particular court, you may sub in as long as that player was not in the original lineup. And for a rain makeup that did not start on any court, you can reinstate the court that you would have defaulted. If your original players can't make the agreed upon makeup day and time and you can't find a sub, you default that court. So on USTA.com, you can search for friend at court and the code. And I would highly recommend that everyone just take a glance at some of the things in there. It answers a lot of the really practical questions for things that come up during matches, such as calling lets or times for changeover, or just different rules on things that people have questions about quite often in an unofficiated match. For example, a server is required to call the score at the beginning of each game, and you shouldn't serve until the receiver is ready. Play is continuous, 20 seconds between points, 90 seconds between games, 2 minutes for each set. I don't think that anyone needs to get out a stopwatch, but you shouldn't be taking 2 and 3 minutes in between points and games. The game needs to be played continuously. And then a player can reach over the net to hit the ball only if it landed on his side and travels over the net because of a gust of wind or backspin. So you can't reach over the net. People ask me that question quite a bit as well. So the code's the summary of procedures that players should follow. Warm-up serves before the first serve of the match. You don't do first in. Player makes calls on their own side of the net. The spectators do not make the calls. The players make the calls. The opponent gets the benefit of the doubt. If a ball touches any part of the line, it is good. If it touches the outside of the line, it is good. If it touches the back of the line, it is good. Any part of the line. It does not have to touch the inside of the line. Either partner can make calls in doubles, but if you disagree, it's the opponent's point. If one of you says that it's in and the other one says that it's out, it's out. If you make an out call and then a split second later you realize that it was actually in, play stops. You don't replay the point. It's awarded to your opponent. Again, spectators never make calls and should be courteous. No cheering on opponents' unforced errors. So if your team makes a really good shot, then you can appropriately cheer for them. If they make a really good shot and force an error, you can cheer for them. Please don't cheer on a weak shot that just gets put in the bottom of the net or sailed out. It's not very good tennis etiquette. When a ball rolls on the court, any player on that court can call a let. Don't cross the net to inspect a mark. A player shouldn't put into play or hit over the net an obvious fault. That would be if you're receiving a serve and it's 5 feet long. It's very, very clearly out. Don't rifle the ball back over the net. Some people aren't paying attention once they realize that the serve was long, and we've had some situations where people have been hit. So just let the ball go. To resolve a score dispute, please go to the net and discuss it somewhat quietly instead of yelling from the baseline across to the other baseline and disrupting everyone else. What you need to do is go back to the point where you agree. So if one of you thinks it's 40-15 and the other one thinks it's 30 all, but the last point that you both agree on is 15 all, then you go back to 15 all and start playing from there. If you're totally convinced that you're right and the other person is totally convinced that they're right and you can't agree, then you spin a racket or flip a coin, and whoever wins, that's the score you go back to. Talking when a ball is in play, doubles players should not talk when the ball is moving towards their opponent court. So once you've hit the ball and the ball is traveling back towards the other side of the net, you shouldn't be talking. And points played in good faith stand. So I know that's a lot of information that we covered, and there's a lot more of it in the rules and in the Google Drive. So if you have questions, please feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer them. You should have your schedules and see when your matches are starting. Hopefully it will be warm and nice, and everyone will get started on time and have a great season. And again, thank you guys all so much for listening, and thank you for being a captain this season. And I hope each and every one of you have a wonderful time playing tennis this spring. Thank you. Bye-bye.